Emma's parents had just welcomed their first child into a quiet suburban home, trusting their lives and their baby's safety to a seemingly kind babysitter named Clara, but behind her gentle smile, a hidden danger lurked, one that would turn their perfect life upside down and leave a community shaken to its core. The quiet suburban neighborhood seemed like the perfect place to raise a family. Tree-lined streets stretched for blocks, and children's laughter drifted from playgrounds into the warm afternoon air. Neighbors waved to one another as they passed, and everything carried the sense of safety and routine that many dream of. In one charming house, freshly painted and tidy, a young couple had just welcomed their first child, a baby girl named Emma. Life was full of excitement and joy, and the parents were careful to create an environment of love and comfort for their new daughter. They spent hours reading to her, rocking her to sleep, and cherishing each tiny milestone, from her first smile to the first time she rolled over on her own. As the months went by, the demands of work began to pull the parents in different directions. They knew they needed help, someone trustworthy to care for Emma when they weren't home. After searching through resumes and interviews, they chose Clara, a woman who seemed ideal. Clara was polite, articulate, and expressed a genuine love for children. She had experienced babysitting for several families and spoke confidently about her methods for keeping children safe, entertained, and happy. From the very first meeting, she was attentive to Emma, playing gently on the floor, singing songs, and showing an almost instinctive understanding of the baby's needs. Initially, everything seemed perfect. The parents felt relieved, almost grateful, for the peace of mind Clara brought. Their schedules no longer carried the same weight of worrying, and the household rhythm seemed to settle into a comfortable pattern. Emma thrived under her care, giggling when Clara entered the room and responding eagerly to her playful antics. The trust between the family and the babysitter grew steadily. Friends and relatives would comment on how lucky the parents were to have found someone so kind and capable, and the parents themselves often marveled at how smoothly life had begun to run. But soon, small, strange incidents began to appear, subtle enough to be easy to dismiss but persistent enough to draw attention. Emma would wake up in the middle of the night crying inconsolably, complaining of stomach pains that seemed sudden and severe. She developed fevers that didn't respond to typical remedies, and sometimes she would seem unusually lethargic or pale for no apparent reason. The parents initially thought these episodes were part of the normal unpredictability of infancy, common illnesses, colds, and viruses that most babies experienced. But as the weeks passed, the incidents grew more frequent and more severe, creating an annoying sense of unease that they couldn't shake. Late at night, they would sit together, Emma finally asleep in her crib, and try to make sense of what was happening. Nothing in the house had changed, and Clara's behavior remained outwardly normal. There were no signs of neglect, no obvious hazards, nothing that could explain why their baby's health was deteriorating. The parents began to notice a pattern. The episodes often occurred after periods when Clara was alone with Emma. It was an observation that made their stomachs tighten, but they hesitated to jump to conclusions. Clara had seemed so trustworthy, so caring. Could it really be possible that someone they welcomed into their home could harm their child? The worrying grew, and what had begun as small doubts turned into persistent anxiety. Each trip to the pediatrician brought more questions, more tests, and more fear. In the safe, familiar walls of their home, the parents started to realize that the perfect life they had imagined might be more fragile than they ever expected. The sense of security that had once defined their neighborhood now felt fragile, as if danger could hide behind even the kindest smile. The unease that had begun to settle in the parents' minds soon turned into alarm. Emma's fevers became more unpredictable, and her stomach pains more intense. The pediatrician, initially reassuring, grew concerned after reviewing the baby's blood tests. The results were alarming. Traces of ethylene glycol, a chemical commonly found in antifreeze, were detected in her system. The news sent shockwaves through the household. How could such a dangerous substance have entered their home and, more importantly, their child's body? The idea was unthinkable, almost impossible, and yet the tests left no room for doubt. Panic gripped the parents as they tried to reconcile the warmth and care they had seen in Clara with the frightening reality revealed by the lab reports. The house, once a haven, began to feel different. Everything was suddenly suspect, every object and corner of the home a potential threat. Investigators quietly arrived to examine the environment, checking every cabinet, drawer, and storage area. Cleaning supplies were inspected, bottles and utensils examined, even the water in the tap was tested. The initial sweep revealed nothing unusual, no obvious source of the chemical that had poisoned their child. Yet the questions lingered. If the poison wasn't accidentally ingested, then someone must have introduced it intentionally. The horrifying thought that someone inside their home could harm Emma was almost impossible to process. Clara, who had once seemed the embodiment of trust, now faced scrutiny. Investigators noticed inconsistencies in her explanations. Small details she had provided about the timing of feedings and the baby's behavior didn't always align with the evidence or the recollections of the parents. Though she remained calm and composed, every answer she gave was dissected for hidden meaning. Her steady demeanor, once comforting, now felt suspicious and detached. In the background, the parents wrestled with disbelief. How could someone they had welcomed into their home, someone who had played with Emma and sung her lullabies, be capable of such an act? Authorities began to piece together a timeline of events. They compared the moments Emma fell ill with Clara's periods of solo care. Patterns emerged, subtle but undeniable, that tied the episodes of poisoning to times when Clara was in charge. The investigators also reviewed Emma's medical history, trying to rule out environmental causes or accidental ingestion. But each path led back to the same chilling conclusion: the chemical was introduced deliberately. Neighbors, once a source of comfort, became a source of whispered speculation. The family received polite but cautious glances as the investigation quietly unfolded. The idea that someone among them could be dangerous was almost too much to bear. The parents felt isolated, trapped in a home that now carried shadows of fear and suspicion. Sleep became difficult, and even everyday tasks were tinged with anxiety. Every feeding, every bottle prepared, was now approached with trepidation. The simple acts of caring for their child had become exercises in vigilance and doubt. As the days passed, the sense of normalcy evaporated completely. The parents were forced to confront a terrifying possibility: that harm had come not from an accident, but from someone they trusted implicitly. The uncertainty and fear created a tension that hung over the house like a dark cloud. Emma's health, fragile yet resilient, became the center of their lives, and the search for answers became an obsession. The parents could no longer rely on instinct or trust. They had to face a grim reality that someone close to them might have betrayed that trust in the most unimaginable way. Detectives began to dig deeper into Clara's past, hoping to find clues that could explain the alarming events in the household. At first, her history seemed flawless. She had worked as a babysitter for years, often receiving glowing recommendations from families. On paper, she appeared reliable, experienced, and responsible. But as investigators examined her employment records more closely, inconsistencies began to emerge. There were gaps in her work history that could not be accounted for, and some of the references she had provided were difficult to verify. When speaking to previous employers, patterns began to appear. Families reported children falling ill under her care, sometimes mysteriously, and in several cases, Clara had left abruptly without giving a clear reason. These accounts were scattered, isolated at first glance, but when placed together, they painted a troubling picture. Financial records added another layer of concern. Clara had recently taken out multiple short-term loans and appeared to be under significant financial pressure. Investigators considered the possibility that her financial difficulties could have motivated harmful behavior, though intent could not be proven by money alone. Still, the combination of unexplained past incidents and financial strain raised serious questions. Authorities started to wonder if there was more to Clara's story than the cheerful, attentive persona she presented to the family. As the investigation unfolded, the detectives also examined Clara's personal life. They looked at her relationships, her social media activity, and her daily habits, searching for any unusual patterns. While some aspects were ordinary, certain findings raised eyebrows. Searches on her phone revealed unsettling topics, though at this stage, nothing conclusively tied her to the poisoning. Investigators realized that they needed more than speculation. They needed evidence, something tangible that could connect her directly to the incidents involving Emma. Meanwhile, the parents struggled with their own conflicting emotions. They remembered the laughter and joy Clara had brought to the house, the careful attention she had shown to Emma, and the genuine warmth that had seemed so natural. The thought that the same person could be responsible for the baby's suffering was almost unbearable. Each time they considered the possibility, it felt like their sense of reality was being pulled apart. Yet the emerging details of Clara's past could not be ignored. Every new revelation added weight to their suspicion, eroding the trust they had once taken for granted. Investigators also began to examine patterns in timing and opportunity. Clara had been alone with Emma during nearly every incident of poisoning, and the medical reports indicated that the chemical exposure was deliberate. The idea of accident became increasingly implausible. Detectives had to consider not just what had happened, but why it had happened and what Clara's motives could have been. The combination of opportunity, past behavior, and possible financial stress painted a troubling picture, though proof still remained just out of reach. As the days turned into weeks, the investigation became more intense. Every detail of Clara's life was scrutinized, every possible connection explored. The detectives were determined to uncover the truth, knowing that the life of an innocent child had already been at risk. Each discovery brought new tension, and the sense of urgency grew stronger. It became clear that the answers would not be simple, and the line between trust and betrayal had been crossed in a way that would forever change the lives of those involved. The family, the community, and even the investigators themselves were forced to confront a reality that was far darker than anyone had anticipated. The investigation took a dramatic turn when a breakthrough finally emerged. After weeks of careful examination and rechecking every detail, forensic teams discovered something alarming hidden in a seldom-used cabinet of the house. A small bottle of antifreeze, carefully concealed, tested positive for ethylene glycol, the very substance that had appeared in Emma's bloodstream. The discovery sent shockwaves through the case. It was no longer a matter of speculation or circumstantial evidence. There was a physical trace of the poison that had made the baby so dangerously ill. Investigators immediately turned their attention to the context in which the substance had been placed and how it could have entered Emma's system. Alongside the discovery of the antifreeze, forensic experts traced subtle residues to a baby bottle that had been used during Clara's care. The pattern of chemical contamination suggested deliberate introduction rather than accidental exposure. Investigators examined timelines, comparing the moments Emma fell ill to Clara's periods of supervision, and the alignment was chilling. The episodes of poisoning consistently occurred during times when Clara was alone with the baby, further tightening the circle of suspicion. The evidence, once abstract and circumstantial, began to form a clear and troubling picture. Digital evidence added another layer of unease. Clara's phone records revealed internet searches that investigators found deeply concerning. Among routine queries were phrases that suggested knowledge of harmful substances and ways to avoid detection. While digital footprints alone could not prove guilt, they added context to the physical evidence, indicating that Clara had at least considered the methods and consequences of using toxins in her work. The combination of forensic findings, timelines, and digital records made the authorities increasingly confident that the poisoning was intentional. Despite the mounting evidence, the case remained tense and complex. Clara maintained her innocence, presenting herself as calm and composed under scrutiny. Her defense argued that contamination was possible, that mishandling of evidence could not be ruled out, and that the findings did not conclusively demonstrate intent. The courtroom atmosphere was charged, filled with the silent tension of a family seeking answers and a community grappling with disbelief. Every new piece of evidence was dissected, every expert testimony weighed carefully as the investigation moved from suspicion toward a more definitive conclusion. The implications of the discovery were staggering. The family, who had once welcomed Clara with open arms, now faced the reality that someone they trusted may have deliberately endangered their child. The community was shaken. The thought that a seemingly kind and dependable babysitter could pose such a threat challenging everything they believed about trust and safety. For the parents, every day was a mixture of relief that Emma was alive and lingering fear over what could have happened if the poisoning had gone unnoticed for longer. The breakthrough left the investigators with a critical task, proving beyond doubt that the poison had been administered intentionally and linking it directly to Clara. Every detail had to be precise, every moment accounted for, because the stakes were higher than ever. The case had transformed from a troubling medical mystery into a chilling story of potential betrayal, deception, and calculated risk. The discovery of the antifreeze, the contaminated bottle, and the digital searches brought the investigation to a fever pitch, leaving no room for simple explanations. The truth was beginning to surface, and with it, a deeper understanding of how trust had been manipulated and innocence put in jeopardy. Months of legal proceedings followed the shocking revelations, and the case of Clara and the poisoned baby gripped the attention of everyone involved. The courtroom became a stage for tension, suspense, and intense scrutiny. Prosecutors laid out a chilling narrative, carefully detailing the timeline of Emma's illnesses, the discovery of antifreeze, the contaminated baby bottle, and the digital searches. Each piece of evidence was presented as part of a meticulous chain, connecting Clara directly to the acts that had endangered the infant. They argued that the poisoning was deliberate and calculated, pointing to the consistency of the episodes and the opportunity Clara had during her periods of unsupervised care. Every moment, every detail was examined to show premeditation and intent. The defense fought to sow doubt. They highlighted the possibility of contamination, inconsistencies in witness accounts, and alternative explanations for the presence of chemicals in the home. They questioned the reliability of digital evidence and argued that the tragic incidents could have occurred without deliberate malice. Clara herself maintained a calm demeanor, insisting on her innocence and presenting herself as a caregiver wrongfully accused. The courtroom atmosphere was tense, a mixture of disbelief, fear, and anticipation. Each day brought new testimony, new evidence, and a growing sense that the truth was simultaneously within reach and difficult to grasp. For the parents, the trial was emotionally grueling. Reliving the events that had put Emma in danger, recounting the fear and uncertainty of those early days, and confronting the possibility of betrayal by someone they had trusted was almost unbearable. Yet, they attended every session, determined to see justice done. Each revelation, each piece of evidence presented in court was a reminder of the fragility of trust and the devastating consequences when it is broken. They had to navigate their grief, their anger, and their relief that Emma had survived, all while facing the reality that someone close to their family had potentially caused immense harm. As the trial progressed, the jury was tasked with weighing the evidence carefully. The forensic findings were compelling, the patterns of illness undeniable, and the digital records unsettling. The prosecutors had built a comprehensive case demonstrating a connection between Clara and the deliberate administration of poison. Over time, it became increasingly clear that the chain of events pointed toward intentional harm, and the arguments of the defense, though detailed, could not fully counter the mounting evidence. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as jurors deliberated, each day of discussion stretching the uncertainty for everyone involved. Finally, the verdict was delivered. Clara was found guilty of attempted murder, her calm presence in the courtroom giving way to the realization of the consequences of her actions. The sentence was lengthy, reflecting the severity of the crime and the breach of trust that had left a family scarred. For Emma, the ordeal became a distant, though indelible, memory. She recovered fully, growing stronger with each passing day, but the shadow of what had occurred lingered in the minds of her parents and the community. The case became a story of caution, a stark reminder of how appearances can deceive and how trust, once violated, leaves lasting scars. The events were forever etched in the lives of those involved, a powerful example of resilience, vigilance, and the pursuit of justice in the face of unimaginable betrayal.